Picture this. It's 1975. America is reeling from the Arab oil embargo. Gas lines stretch around blocks. Detroit's bloated land yachts suddenly look ridiculous at the pump. And then, out of nowhere, American Motors Corporation rolls out what looks like a spaceship crossed with a fishbowl. Welcome to the story of the AMC Pacer, a car so strange, so controversial, that it became one of the most recognizable automobiles in American history. Some called it the ugliest car ever made. Others saw it as revolutionary. Today, we're diving into 13 shocking facts about this automotive oddball that will make you see the Pacer in a whole new light. The mid-1970s were tough times for the American auto industry. The 1973 oil crisis had changed everything. Suddenly, those massive Cadillacs and Ford LTDs that guzzled gas like there was no tomorrow weren't looking so attractive anymore. American Motors, the scrappy underdog of Detroit, saw an opportunity. They weren't General Motors, Ford, or Chrysler. They couldn't compete head-to-head with the Big Three's resources. So they had to think differently. And boy, did they think differently. Fact 1. The Pacer was designed for an engine that never existed. Here's where our story gets interesting. When AMC started Project Amigo in 1971, that was the Pacer's code name, they had a revolutionary plan. They weren't designing this car around a conventional engine. No, they had their eyes on something far more futuristic. The Wankel rotary engine. General Motors was developing rotary engines, and AMC struck a deal to buy them. The entire Pacer was engineered around this compact, smooth-running power plant. The car's unusual proportions, that short hood, everything was optimized for the rotary. But here's the problem. In 1974, GM pulled the plug on their rotary engine program. The engines were unreliable, guzzled gas, and consumed oil at alarming rates. Remember, this was right after the oil crisis. A gas-guzzling engine was the last thing anyone wanted. AMC was left scrambling. They had already invested $52 million in tooling and another $8 million in associated expenses. The car was essentially done, but it had no engine. So they did what they had to do. They shoehorned in their existing 232 cubic inch inline-six engine. This wasn't a light, compact rotary. This was a heavy, conventional engine that was never meant to fit in that space. The result? A car that was heavier than intended, with compromised weight distribution and handling that suffered from too much weight on the front wheels. This single decision would haunt the Pacer for its entire production run. Fact 2. It was as wide as a Cadillac, but shorter than a Volkswagen. Let me paint you a picture of just how unusual the Pacer's dimensions were. This car measured 171.5 inches long with a 100-inch wheelbase. To put that in perspective, it was about the same length as a Volkswagen Dasher, a true compact car. But here's the shocking part. The Pacer was 77 inches wide. That's as wide as a full-size Cadillac or Lincoln of the era. AMC marketed it as the first wide small car, and they weren't kidding. Think about what that means. You're sitting in what looks like a compact car from the outside, lengthwise, but when you open the door and sit inside, you've got the shoulder room of a luxury sedan. It was genuinely unique. No other manufacturer was doing this. Why so wide? There were two reasons. First, AMC wanted to give buyers who were used to big American cars a familiar, spacious feel in a smaller package. Americans in the 1970s weren't accustomed to cramped European compacts. The width made the Pacer feel substantial and comfortable. Second, AMC was anticipating severe federal safety regulations that were supposed to take effect in 1980. These regulations would require cars to withstand major impacts. The wide body was designed to accommodate the heavy structural reinforcement needed to meet these standards. Here's the irony. The Big Three lobbied hard, and those tough regulations were significantly watered down before they took effect. But AMC had already built the Pacer to meet the stricter standards that never came to be. So they were left with an overbuilt, overweight car that was engineered for safety regulations that didn't exist. Fact 3. 37% of the car's surface was glass. If you've ever seen a Pacer, you know about the glass. It's impossible to miss. The car's body surface was 37% glass, 5,715 square inches of it, to be precise. That was 16% more glass area than the average passenger car of the time. Car and Driver magazine dubbed it the Flying Fishbowl, and the nickname stuck. When you sat inside a Pacer, you felt like you were in a greenhouse on wheels. The visibility was extraordinary. You could see everything around you. AMC designed it this way deliberately. Those massive glass areas weren't just for show. In the 1970s, safety meant visibility. The thinking was that if drivers could see better in all directions, they could avoid accidents more easily. The wraparound glass provided exceptional sight lines. But all that glass had consequences. First, it made the car heavier. Glass is heavy, and 37% glass coverage added significant weight. Second, it turned the Pacer into an oven in summer and an icebox in winter. The air conditioning system had to work overtime to keep the cabin comfortable. And in winter, that huge glass area radiated heat out faster than the heater could replace it. Third, and this might be the biggest issue, all that glass contributed to poor fuel economy. More weight meant more fuel consumption. And in an era when people were buying small cars specifically to save gas, this was a serious problem. Fact 4. The passenger door was 4 inches longer than the driver's door. Here's one of the Pacer's most distinctive features, and one you might not notice unless you're looking for it. The passenger side door was 4 inches longer than the driver's side door. Yes, you read that right. The doors were asymmetrical. Why would AMC do this? The reasoning was actually quite thoughtful. Since the Pacer was a 2-door car, rear seat passengers had to climb through the front doors to get in and out. AMC figured that in America, where we drive on the right side of the road, rear passengers would typically enter from the passenger side, the curb side, which was safer than getting in from the street side. So they made the passenger door longer to give rear passengers easier access. It was a clever idea that showed AMC was thinking about real-world usability. But here's where it got complicated. When AMC tried to export Pacers to right-hand drive markets like the United Kingdom, this design feature backfired spectacularly. In the UK, the longer door was now on the driver's side, and the shorter door was on the passenger side. British reviewers pointed out that in typically cramped British parking spaces, getting out of the driver's door was nearly impossible. It was exactly backwards from what AMC intended. Fact 5. Sales collapsed. After 2 strong years, the Pacer's launch in February 1975 was a sensation. In its first year of production, AMC sold 145,728 units. The factory in Kenosha, Wisconsin, couldn't build them fast enough. Production started at 530 cars per day, increased to 700 by April, and jumped to 800 per day by September. This was the first time a new AMC model reached 100,000 units in less than a year. The automotive press was fascinated. The public was curious. Dealers were overwhelmed with demand. The second year, 1976, was still solid with 117,244 sales. But then something happened, or rather, several things happened. First, the Big Three finally responded to the small car market with their own compact models backed by massive marketing budgets. Second, import manufacturers like Toyota and Honda were gaining serious traction with lighter, more efficient cars. Third, word got out about the Pacer's problems. The car was heavy, so it got poor fuel economy, the very thing people bought small cars to avoid. By 1977, sales dropped to just 58,264 units. In 1978, sales collapsed to 21,231 units. By 1979, only about 10,000 Pacers found buyers. The final year, 1980, saw a mere 1,746 units produced before AMC pulled the plug in December 1979. Total production, approximately 280,858 units in the United States. For a car that cost AMC $60 million to develop, this was far below the break-even point. The company had needed to sell close to 100,000 units per year for 5 years just to recoup their investment. They never came close. Fact 6. It was one of the first American cars with rack and pinion steering. Here's a fact that often gets overlooked. The AMC Pacer was only the second American production car to feature rack and pinion steering, right behind the Ford Pinto. Now, if you're not a car person, you might be wondering why this matters. In the 1970s, almost all American cars used a recirculating ball steering system. It was the traditional setup, reliable but not particularly precise or responsive. European cars, on the other hand, had been using rack and pinion steering for years. It was more direct, gave better road feel, and was generally considered superior. AMC put rack and pinion steering in the Pacer as part of their effort to make it a modern, advanced vehicle. And in theory, it should have been a selling point. The system provided more responsive steering than traditional American cars. But there was a problem. Remember, the Pacer was supposed to have a light rotary engine up front. Instead, it got stuck with AMC's heavy inline-six. That engine put far more load on the front suspension and steering components than the system was designed to handle. The result? Rack and pinion steering failures were common on 1975 Pacers. Owners would experience sudden loss of steering or extremely heavy steering effort. For a brand new car, this was unacceptable. It damaged the Pacer's reputation for reliability right out of the gate. AMC eventually addressed the problem with stronger components, but the damage was done. Fact 7. Wayne's World made it an icon. Decades after production. Ended. Let's jump ahead to 1992. The Pacer had been out of production for 12 years. Most people remembered it as either a quirky oddball or an outright failure. Then Mike Myers and Dana Carvey released Wayne's World. The movie featured a 1976 Pacer painted baby blue with flame decals, mismatched wheels, and interior modifications, including a licorice dispenser. They called it the Mirthmobile, and it became one of the most memorable movie cars of the 1990s. The scene where Wayne, Garth, and their friends sing along to Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody while driving in the Pacer became iconic. That scene alone revived interest in Queen among American audiences and made the Pacer cool in an ironic, self-aware way. Suddenly, a car that had been the butt of jokes for being ugly and impractical became a nostalgic symbol of the 1990s. The Pacer's appearance in Wayne's World gave it cultural relevance it never had when it was actually in production. Here's the fascinating part. That exact car from the movie was sold at a Barrett-Jackson auction in 2016 for $37,400. Then, after a full restoration, it sold again in 2022 for $71,500. A movie prop car that was once considered automotive junk had nearly doubled in value in 6 years. Wayne's World didn't just save the Pacer's reputation, it transformed the car from a failed automotive experiment into a beloved cultural artifact. Fact 8. AMC tried to save it with a V8 engine. By 1978, AMC knew the Pacer was in trouble. Sales were plummeting, and the consensus was that the car lacked power. The base 232 cubic inch inline-six made only 90 horsepower. Even the upgraded 258 cubic inch 6 wasn't enough to move the Pacer's substantial weight with any enthusiasm. So AMC did what Americans automakers always did when a car needed more power. They dropped in a V8. Starting in 1978, you could order a Pacer with AMC's 304 cubic inch V8 engine, making around 130 horsepower and significantly more torque. To accommodate the larger engine, AMC redesigned the Pacer's hood with a distinctive bulge in the middle. They also gave the car a new front-end design that some people said looked like a Mercedes-Benz. But here's the thing. The V8 didn't save the Pacer. Only about 10% of Pacers sold in 1978 and 1979 had the V8. That's roughly 2,500 cars total. Why didn't more people want it? First, it made the car even heavier, worsening the front-end weight problem. Second, fuel economy dropped into the low teens. In an era of high gas prices, a small car that got worse mileage than many full-size cars was a tough sell. Third, the V8 option increased the price. People were buying compact cars to save money. The V8 Pacer became something of a collector's curiosity, a muscle car in disguise. But as a sales strategy, the V8 option was too little, too late. Fact 9. The station wagon outsold the original design. In 1977, AMC introduced a station wagon version of the Pacer. The wagon was stretched by about 7 inches in overall length to 177 inches, but it only weighed 76 pounds more than the hatchback coupe. What made the wagon work was its practicality. It had a 2-part rear hatch, an upper glass panel that lifted independently, and a lower door that swung outward. Cargo space measured 24.9 cubic feet behind the rear seats and expanded to 48.3 cubic feet with the seats folded down. For a compact car, that was excellent capacity. The wagon also looked less radical than the hatchback. That squared-off rear end gave it a more conventional appearance. Many buyers who found the original Pacer too weird were willing to consider the wagon. Here's the remarkable part. In 1977, the wagon outsold the hatchback. Out of 58,264 total Pacer sales that year, 37,999 were wagons compared to only 2,265 hatchbacks. That's a 2-to-1 ratio. This trend continued through 1978 and 1979, with wagons accounting for more than 70% of sales. The wagon version was clearly the better product, but by the time AMC figured this out, the Pacer's reputation was already damaged beyond repair. Fact 10. It was over-engineered for safety regulations that never happened. Here's one of the great ironies of the Pacer story. AMC designed this car to meet federal safety regulations that were supposed to take effect for 1980 model year vehicles. These regulations would have required cars to withstand 50-mile-per-hour front crashes, 25-mile-per-hour side impacts, and 30-mile-per-hour rollover tests. Those were serious standards, far stricter than anything that existed at the time. AMC engineered the Pacer from the ground up to meet them. The wide B-pillars had roll bar-like characteristics. The body structure was reinforced with heavy steel. The car was designed with massive bumpers that could absorb impacts. AMC invested heavily in making the Pacer one of the safest cars on the road. And then the Big Three lobbied the federal government hard. They argued that meeting the new regulations would require enormous investments. They had the political muscle to get the regulations significantly weakened. By the time the regulations actually took effect, many of the strictest requirements had been deleted or postponed. The Pacer was already designed and tooled for standards that no longer existed. So AMC was left with a car that was overbuilt and overweight for regulations that weren't enforced. Their competitors built lighter, less expensive cars that still met the watered-down standards. The Pacer's weight penalty came from meeting safety requirements that never actually happened. Fact 11. It raced in the Baja 1000 and almost won its class. Here's a fact that'll surprise you. In 1979, a 1976 Pacer competed in the legendary Score Baja 1000 off-road race. Yes, that Baja 1000, one of the most brutal motorsports events in the world, run through the deserts and mountains of Mexico's Baja California peninsula. The Pacer was driven by Gordon Olson and Bob Stone in the Pro-Class race. They were competing against purpose-built race trucks, modified four-wheel drives, and other vehicles specifically prepared for desert racing. And you know what? It did remarkably well. The Pacer was running second in Class 6 and was actually swapping the lead with a V8-powered Ford Ranchero truck. For more than 21 hours, this little fishbowl on wheels was holding its own against tougher competition. Then disaster struck. The Pacer hit something that destroyed its radiator. With no cooling system, the engine overheated and the car had to retire. But the Pacer had proven something important. Its wide stance and solid construction actually made it capable in rough conditions. It wasn't just an oddball economy car. It was genuinely tough. Fact 12. The design process started 4 years before the oil crisis. Here's something that really puts the Pacer in context. Richard Teague, AMC's chief stylist, began working on the Pacer in 1971. That's 4 years before the car went on sale, and 2 years before the 1973 Arab oil embargo that changed the American automotive landscape forever. Think about the timing. In 1971, gas was cheap and plentiful. Detroit was building bigger, more powerful cars every year. The muscle car era was at its peak. Nobody was worried about fuel economy or efficiency. And yet, Richard Teague looked at the trends and saw where things were heading. He anticipated that demand for smaller, more efficient vehicles would increase throughout the 1970s. He was designing a compact car at a time when compact was almost a dirty word in American automotive circles. When the oil crisis hit in 1973, AMC was already 2 years into developing the Pacer. Suddenly, their gamble on a smaller car looked prescient. The problem was that the execution didn't match the vision. The Pacer ended up being too heavy, too wide, and too thirsty for the post-oil crisis market it was supposed to serve. But give AMC credit. They saw the need for change before it was obvious to everyone else. The Pacer might have failed as a product, but it succeeded as a predictor of where the market was heading. Fact 13. Only 280,858 were ever built, making survivors increasingly rare. Here's our final fact, and it's one that matters to collectors today. Over the Pacer's entire 5-year production run from 1975 to 1980, AMC built approximately 280,858 units for the United States market. Now, 280,000 might sound like a lot of cars. But consider this. Ford built over 300,000 Mustangs in 1965 alone, in a single year. The Pacer's total production over 5 years was less than what successful models sold in 1 or 2 strong years. And here's the thing. Cars from the 1970s, especially smaller American cars, didn't survive well. They rusted. They were considered disposable. When they broke down or looked tired, people junked them without a second thought. The Pacer, with its reputation as an oddball, was particularly vulnerable to being scrapped. Today, intact Pacers are genuinely rare. Unlike popular classics like the Mustang or Corvette, there's no reproduction parts industry for the Pacer. Pacer-specific body parts, trim pieces, and glass are scarce. You're searching junkyards and hoping. The car has been flirting with collectible status for years. Values have been creeping up. You can still find Project Pacers for a few $1,000s, but nice examples are commanding $10,000 to $20,000. The Wayne's World car proved that exceptional Pacers can bring serious money. As survivors become scarcer, the Pacer's collectability will likely increase. It's a perfect candidate for the interesting oddball segment of the collector car market. So there you have it, 13 shocking facts about the AMC Pacer, America's aquarium on wheels. From its origins as a futuristic rotary-engined car to its transformation into a movie icon, the Pacer's story is more interesting than most people realize. Was it ugly? Many people thought so. Was it a product failure? Financially, definitely. AMC never recouped its investment, and the car's low sales contributed to the company's eventual decline as an independent automaker. But was it useless? Was it pointless? Not at all. The Pacer represented genuine innovation and boldness. In an industry dominated by safety and copying what worked, AMC tried something completely different. They designed a car from the inside out, prioritizing passenger space and safety over conventional styling. They anticipated market trends years before they happened. They took risks. Sometimes the most interesting cars aren't the most successful. The Pacer failed in the market, but it managed to be memorable. 50 years after its launch, we're still talking about it. We're still fascinated by its unusual design and hypothetical history. How many forgotten compact cars from the 1970s can say the same? Now I want to hear from you. Did you ever own a Pacer? Do you remember seeing them on the streets when they were new? Did the movie Wayne's World change your opinion about this car? Maybe you knew someone who drove one, or have memories of riding in one as a child. Share your memories and experiences in the comments below. The Pacer community is small but passionate, and every story helps keep the history of this unusual car alive. Your experiences are important, and sharing them helps build our community of classic car enthusiasts. If you enjoyed this dive into automotive history, click the like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know what kind of content you want to see more of. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Until the next video with unforgettable memories.